here to the laboratory for the global villages. My name is Franz Narada. I'm living in Vienna. I'm a sociologist and futurist, and I'm also a hotel keeper, so you can always visit me and share this wealth of research that we have gathered here. We're researching an exciting possibility which we think will totally change the way we live and work. We call it Global Villages, and Global Villages is an idea which emerges out of the possibilities of our time, but also a practice that we can observe in many corners of the world. It's the mixture and merger of an increased ecological consciousness about local cycles, local production, local possibilities, with an increased consciousness of the possibilities of global cooperation. I want to give you two thoughts before I explain this further. One thought is that, as we could read recently in Wired magazine, software is reorganizing the world. This is not a new thought. The thought was also expressed by Marshall McLuhan, who said something like, the globalization of knowledge and communication will ultimately lead to an unprecedented renaissance of the local. It was expressed by Feridun Esfandiari in his book Telespheres, where he said that Woodstock would not be possible without the electronic media, which means that the electronic streams, the networks that connect us, they create the need to come together in real space. So we are extrapolating this thought and say, if we have so many communities forming now on the net, cultural communities we call them, communities of vision, of resonance, of values, people who share a certain view of life, we think there is an inevitable consequence that these people will come and move together. So even if it seems right now that these people are isolating themselves by the millions, by the tenth of millions or hundreds of millions, they are emigrating to a continent called Siberia, far away from the real world. We think that eventually this emigration will turn into an immigration, into temporary and permanent spaces of co-housing and co-working and co-living. So what we see today is already a first wave of people who say, we want to build real living space around common values. For example, eco-villages. We think that this trend is very much reinforced by the networks. And by the way, it is also reinforced by many other technologies that allow us to create self-contained spaces which build around their own vision without destroying or disturbing their neighbors. Yeah, and the second thought is also very encouraging. A good friend of mine told me recently, do you know that you could consider the shift between urban and rural? The fact that people increasingly desire to live in rural areas, you could consider it like a parallel to the to the development of the desirability of the height in which you lived in urban buildings before. Many people, when there was no lift, no elevator, desired to live not too far up, and it was a noble thing to live in the first floor and the second floor maximum. And then, when the lift was introduced, suddenly they moved to the top, to the penthouse. In Vienna, there is a funny story where even the name of the floor went up because people wanted to keep their address. So now in Vienna you find something like the first floor, what could be considered even the third or fourth floor. So this shift in the desirable living space made possible by the lift is exactly the same pattern that will happen to city and village. We will desire to live in the village more than any time before. And village will not be the province of yesterday, but it will be the place of experimentation and invention of the future. So this, as I said, is also supported by many other technologies, like, for example, progress in photovoltaics, which makes it possible to produce and store energy in a much more decentralized way, or green chemistry, or new building materials, building with the help of local materials, earth and straw, and so on. It is still in the making, but there is a revolution in space happening, and that's why we think we have to look at this revolution in its entirety, and we call it the Global Villages Revolution. Now, this is the moment where I can tell you about the physical shape of a global village, and I always use this architectural competition in the 1990s. Exactly, it was in 1994, and I had the honor of being part of the jury at the Park Bid competition organized by Govern Balear, the government of the Balearic Islands, and I think at that time it was a very visionary, fantastic project to ask 10 leading architecture projects in the world, 10 leading architecture firms in the world, to create their particular vision of what they thought would be the optimum way of living and working. And you see prominent names like Norman Foster, you see even it's a little bit used. You see even this fantastic design by Hiroshi Hara and others. But to my pleasure and my surprise, at that time, this was the winning proposal by Richard Rogers. And I said, I cannot believe how exactly they grasped the physical shape that's to come as the main pattern of settlement development in the 21st century. So here it is, what I think is a fair enough concept of global villages. Again, this is the circumstance near Palma. There is a public electric tram going there, and also road. But the way it is, the community is split up in 3 subdivisions, and they could be considered village size. But they are much more than villages. The very interesting thing is they have an urban plaza. Yeah, this could be in Siena or in any other city which has this urban spirit where people come together and they enjoy being in this urban density. Now, this urban density could be a very, very integral part of this global village situation, and it is produced by the well, by the abundance of information and communication services that are available, and they are organized in a way that they serve local purpose. So this sphere, this urban sphere, filters any kind of services available on the globe to support the quality of local life. It could be a tiny university outlet where you can study all subjects from various universities around the world with the perspective of going into a local activity or not. It could be culture. It could be taking part in an opera evening at the Metropolitan. It could be telemedicine. It could be the finest diagnostic and therapy techniques developed in some urban hospitals around the world, and there could be an outlet that gives you immediate access to these abilities, to these achievements in medicine. It could be production. It could be the sharing and the development of designs in cooperative, open source development groups all around the world. And many other things. So the global village has its urban sphere. Attached to this urban sphere, and I think this is the beauty of this design, is the suburban life. It's a place where we can withdraw into our privacy. And this is a very balanced design. And this is the design that people like about today's suburbia. But the point is, it's crazy. For the sake of this design, today we're accepting a distance of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 or up to 100 miles to commute, just to have the privacy of our own space and the opportunity of the urban. Now we can bring it very close together. And around this is a third and very essential sphere of human life. It's the sphere that we could really call the sphere of the rural, the sphere where man blends into nature. And we have new ways of blending into nature. We have ways of almost symbiotic quality. If you think of aquaponics, for example, you can create artificial ecosystems that make nature thrive, and they feed humans much better than anything else. And we have local decentralized production, maybe out of locally produced raw materials. So there will be a big localization. As I said, this was foreseen by some visionaries. But nowadays, with all these technological developments coming together, it's becoming reality. So, this is an invitation. In 2009, I experienced for the first time that a considerable number of young architects and designers was drawn together by these possibilities to design the village of the future. And at that time I was invited by the Clear Village Foundation, which had a great pioneering role at the time in unifying and bringing together visionaries and creating a new wave of imagination which will definitely create a lot of new ventures. In 2014, I am very glad to point at the first architectural practice entirely dedicated to global villages, which is just emerging now in Germany and asking for crowdfunding contributions. I would recommend to look at that and help them get it to existence. And I also want to invite everybody who is interested in this subject to join the Global Villages Network that we initiated many years ago. Thank you very much.